Hi, this is Dan Bullard, retired electronics engineer, sitting out here on Multnomah Channel. Just motored over here. I'm across the river from a houseboat. Wanted to give this a try. I want to talk a little bit about what I've been through in electronics, and that I highlight in my book, The Reluctant Road Warrior, and other things too. One was a case where I was trying to troubleshoot a problem. It's a motorcycle. I was trying to troubleshoot a problem in Korea, or in Taiwan, and I wasn't making any progress. So I talked to my boss and I said, "Hey, I need to fly to Taiwan. Here's what I want to do. I want to go for 2 weeks." And they said, "Fine." So I flew to Taiwan, solved it like that. I should have seen it, but it was a software update, and I should have seen it, but I didn't. So we fixed it, and they were ecstatic. In fact, they invited me to a big party they were having. So I went to this party, had a wonderful time, and then I started touring around with my Spyrox buddies, Spirokeets I call them. And so I toured around Taiwan, visiting customers and talking to people. And after a week and a half, I ended up at one customer site. They had a terrible, terrible problem with a DAC. It was a DAC that was not behaving properly. And so with this DAC, they were looping through the pattern, and it was not giving them the waveform that they expected. And then it turned out, I wasn't an expert on the system, but it turned out I figured out what it was. There's a simple problem, a simple thing you have to do with the pattern to make sure that it loops the right number of times, and they were ignoring that. So I added one statement to the pattern, solved it. So yay, I was solving problems left and right, having a good time. Then I stopped by one more customer, Siliconware. And over there, they were getting ready to test a DAC, a RAM DAC, okay? Which means 3 triple RAM DAC. So 3 DACs, so you can do red, green, and blue on a CRT. Remember those? Cathode ray tubes. So they were doing RAM DAC with a bunch of memory and the whole shebang. So I did a little lecture on how to do it. We had a nice time. They took me out to dinner, ate some kind of disturbing, disgusting stuff, which is the standard fare in Taiwan. And off I went. Flew back home. What I didn't know is when I was in the air, they decided that I had to come back because I was the guy clearly to do the job. They didn't want to take it on. And so my compatriot from Spyrox, Spirokeet, was doing the digital, so I was going to take over doing the analog. So I got back home, they said, "Oh, you need to go back to Taiwan." I'm like, "I just got back from Taiwan. I've been there for 2 weeks." They said, "No, you need to go back to Taiwan and do this thing." So I'm like, "Okay, I've done RAM DACs a million times before. I can do this, no problem." So I figured it'd be a couple of days. So, I got back on a Tuesday. Wednesday, they said, "You got to go back." So I said, "Okay, I'll go on Friday or Saturday." So I think I went on Saturday. So I took off and expecting that everything was going to go fine. Well, I got there on a Saturday night, spent the night, slept the night, and then got up Sunday morning, and Frank, my Spirokeet, came and took me to work. Now this is Sunday, so they're going to take me to work on Sunday, and I'm going to get this done, and I'm going to go home in a couple of days, right? So it turns out that wasn't going to happen. So I went there on Sunday, and I figured out what to do. I wrote the pattern. I whipped it out in no time. Basically, it's just a staircase, okay? A digital staircase 0000 through 255 is what it was, because it was 8-bit RAM DAC. So 0 to 255, and I whipped it out, and the next day, Monday, I soldered up the probe card, because it was going to be a wafer sort. Soldered up the probe card, attached the analog channels to the probe card that I needed to do, and I was in business. So I wrote the code, and by Monday evening, I was certain I was going to have it. And I was getting the right stuff on the scope. Okay, so I got a nice ramp on the scope. That's exactly what you're looking for. So I figured by Tuesday I'd be done and I'd be out of there. Well, Tuesday came, I got started probing a wafer, and it worked fine for a while, and then it stopped working. And they said, oh, that must be something you're doing wrong. And I'm like, no, it's not. I did everything right. No, you're doing something wrong. Okay, fine. So I worked on it Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, and Saturday. They let me have Sunday off. And Monday and Tuesday, I was losing my mind trying to figure out. And they kept saying, oh, no, it's your problem. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, it must be your wafers. They said, no. Those wafers work great on our LTX across the way. Fine, okay. So I worked on it another week. Nothing. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't figure it out. And Memorial Day weekend was coming up. So what I did, I told them I'm leaving on Friday. I'm leaving, before Memorial Day weekend, because I got a big camping trip planned with the neighbors, with my family. Oh no, you've got to stay until this thing works. It's not my fault, I said. They said, oh yeah, it's your fault, absolutely. You guys are screwed up. So it turned out the night before, the day before, it was a Wednesday night, I was working on it, and the prober crapped out. And I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. So yeah, prober crapped out. I went to dinner with a bunch of guys. The guy started working the prober. He didn't even try to troubleshoot. He just decided the power supply was dead, so he replaced the power supply. They took me to dinner, begged me to stay. I said, no fucking way. They took me back to my apartment. They shoveled all kinds of beer into me. I said, no, I'm not staying. I told my good friend Alex, I'm not staying, I'm leaving. So the next day, it turned out I had talked to a guy who drove a taxi in Taiwan. And I talked to him and got his business card. Well, I knew that I couldn't trust Spyrox to take me to the airport. So what I did was I called this guy up. I called him at midnight. And he answered the phone, and I said, I need you to come pick me up at 7 a.m. sharp and take me to Taiwan airport. And he said, okay. So Chiang Kai-shek, 7 a.m., come pick me up at the hotel. So it was a miserable time. It was really miserable. In the meantime, my buddy Steve had showed up, and he was going to help me. And I walked 7 o'clock, or quarter 7, I walked over to his room. I was all packed up, ready to go. I stopped by his room and said, Steve, I'm bugging out. He says, you're leaving me here, aren't you, you bastard? So yes, I am. So I went downstairs. I found my taxi cab. He was ready and waiting for me. Thank God. I got the ride to the airport, and 2 hours later, it's a 2-hour drive. So I'm sitting at the airport. Now I've got to wait till 5 p.m. for my flight. Oh my God. I knew they were going to come after me. So I hung out without being, but here I'm 6 foot tall, right? In a country of where everyone's 5'5" or something like that. So they're going to catch me. They're going to catch me. So I even went to the Burger King so I could get something decent to eat, because I hadn't eaten anything but duck tongues and, oh God, horrible stuff. So finally, I got a decent meal. I went to check in, and they said, I'm sorry, sir, we can't let you check in. Your friend Cliff So will be here in a little while to pick you up. And I'm like, You got to be kidding me. I'm a free person. I can leave if I want. They said, no, not on this airline. And what I should have done is I should have gone to another airline. But I was stupid. I just stuck around, and I figured I could talk to Cliff So when he showed up. He showed up, we had a talk, and I told him, look, Cliff, I'm going to fucking quit if you don't let me go home. I've already talked to my boss. He said, yes, come home, absolutely. So Cliff poured a bunch of beer into me, couldn't get me to change my mind, so he let me go. So I was able to fly home. I got home. The wife was all packed up, ready to go. We went on a camping trip. 2 days later, on that Saturday, I was sick as a dog. I'd been water skiing, and apparently, I didn't know what it was, but I got sick. I had SARS. Fucking SARS. Those bastards gave me SARS. The guy I was working with, Tony, who was always picking his nose, he gave me SARS while I was there. And I found out later, he ended up in the hospital with SARS. I stayed home. I went home. I got out of the camping trip. I drove home with my boat. And I was laying in my bed for a week. I was so sick, but I survived. Tony had to go to the hospital. I was lucky. So I survived that. And it turned out, here's the thing. The whole time they've been telling me that it was my fault. Steve stayed there and worked on it, couldn't get it to pass, so they let him go home and they shipped him some of the wafers. Half of them broke, but he did have some wafers to look at. He sent them to a friend of his in the U.S. They looked at him and said, oh no, there's some kind of coating on the wafer so that when you first start testing, everything will be okay. And then the probe needles will pick up the debris from this coating and it won't work anymore. That's exactly what I was seeing. These bastards held me hostage for 3 weeks. And I'd already been there 2 weeks before, so that's 5 weeks I was in Taiwan. They held me hostage for 3 weeks, saying it was all my fault. It was TSMC's fault. Taiwan Semiconductor, whatever they are. Those fuckers, they screwed up. And the only way we found out was when the wafers ended up on the LTX. They said they were the same wafers. We were testing the same wafers as the LTX. But in fact, these were a different batch. The new batch had this coating on the wafers. And when they hit the LTX, they had the same problem I had. So, do I trust Asians? No fucking way. No way. Okay, that's one problem. And I mean, I nearly died from SARS, so, plus I ruined a 3-day weekend for my family and my neighbors. Okay, another case, I was working at Intel. Now, you'd think Intel in the U.S. I'd be safe, right? Nope. I was an apps engineer at Intel in Hillsboro working on the Pentium 3 chipset, and one of them was a cache memory. And these guys, they called me in this Indian gal, the Ubub kind, the kind, not the Ubub kind, as Lois Griffin would say. She called me into her office and reamed me a new one because my tester, the Schlumberger S9000, she claimed, was causing her probe cards to be destroyed. Because what would happen was they would probe for a while, they'd get maybe 3 wafers in, and then kablamo, the thing would lock up with the probes on the device, on the silicon, and they would turn it off. But when they turned it off, they Z'd down and it fried the goddamn probe card. $20,000. So she reamed me a new one. She made me sit down in her chair and get on her nasty keyboard. Her keyboard was as black as they get. It was black. So she was just a filthy animal. I'm sorry. She was just, her fingers were black, so her keyboard was black. It was a white keyboard, but it was black from her dirt from her fingers. So she assigned me to work with the gal who wrote the program, who was an Asian gal. So I helped her work on the program, out on the test floor, trying to figure this out. And you know what it was? It was her fault. She was doing a linked list. And when you do a linked list in C, you got to make sure that when you get to the bottom of the list, that you delete all the way up. She didn't do that. She deleted the top of the stack. You know what happens when you do that? You leave all that stuff allocated, but it's unknown where it is because you lost the pointer to it. So what happened was, over time, it took up all the memory in the system, and eventually the CPU ran out of memory and it crashed. The tester didn't know any better. He was told to keep all this memory, and this gal was allocating it and not deallocating it. So it was a fuck up with a linked list. They said it was my fault, and they were going to hold my company accountable and the whole shebang. So an Asian chick and an Indian chick, they both fucked up, claiming it was my fault when it wasn't my fault, it was their fault. I never got an apology, not from Intel, not from TSMC, not from Siliconware. They just thought that was the way to do things, okay? Just treat the white guy like shit. That's what they always did. I worked in the Asian apps department, and that was my fault. They always treated me like shit. I remember showing up at Korea one time. The customer was waiting for me, but the sales guy lied to the customer and told him that I was too tired after my trip over from the U.S., so he was going to take me to my hotel. Well, the customer took me then to another customer, Samsung. And my customer called the hotel to find out if he could talk to me. I wasn't there. I hadn't checked in yet. I was at the other customer. I was at Samsung. So I went to that customer, walked in the door, and they said, "Oh, we have a problem. Fix it." And I'm like, you ever seen Star Trek Next Generation, the Packlids? That was like that. So I went there. I sat down in the chair and they said, "Fix it." And I said, "How do I log in?" "Well, you know everything." I'm like, "How do I know your fucking password? How do I know what account to use? How do I know what program to run? Get it set up for me and show me what's wrong." So they did that thinking, oh, the white guy should be able to figure all this out. He's a genius. All white people are. That's the attitude. If anything breaks, it's the white guy's fault. So this guy, he finally got it set up. I went in, I figured it out. It was a hardware problem. And I don't fix hardware. I do software. So I handed it back to the sales guy who in his previous life had been the hardware guy. So he had to go fix it. It was great. It was lovely. But still I got reamed out by my customer the next day when I finally did show up, and they said, why did you let the sales guy take you to that other customer? I'm like, look, dude, I'm the white guy. I don't get a say. They take me where I'm supposed to go. And in that case, I was kept prisoner until the goddamn union threw a strike and they were going to attack the building. And so the last thing that I did before I left, they told me I had to leave because they didn't want me to get hurt. But the last thing I did is I was pushing stuff up against doors to keep the union people from breaking in. That's how dangerous it was. So I've had my fill of Asians. And it's not just Asians in Asia, it's Asians in the U.S. So I'm sorry if you're Asian. I have lots of good friends. I know people say that, oh, I have friends that are Asian. My favorite person at Raytheon was an Asian gal named Melanie. And we had a wonderful time. So So I'm not saying all Asians are like that. But the Asian mindset is different than the white mindset. And as much as I really loved Melanie, I'm sorry, I just have to say it, they drive me crazy. And I don't really want America to turn into Asia, because then there's no place to escape. I mean, I got out of Intel because of what they were doing to me over there because of the Asians. The white folks there were fine. There were no blacks. The only Mexicans that were there worked in the cafeteria. So the white folks were okay. It was the Asians that drove me crazy. So I'm sorry, but if you're Asian, I like Asians. Asians are fine. Just don't make me work for them. Okay, that's enough ranting. This is Dan Bullard, sitting on the river. Take it easy. See you later.